Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to double check, make sure I did. I have this class 4 times the honors version, 2 times the regular version. So like by the end of the cycle, I can't remember for sure what I talked about and what, you know what I mean? Anyways, it gets hard. Good. So last time we spent, you guys spent some time in class working on your reviews and such, right? Do you guys have any questions that have come up in the meantime that we want to deal with? Again, can be specific or general. Blake?
Okay, so finding the period for a tangent graph is just, it's like equal to pi, it's just pi, period of pi c.
Pi times c.
Pi times c. So is there any difference between the amplitude of the sine, cosine, and tangent graph?
Well, tangents don't have amplitudes because they have no extrema.
Okay, then how would you find the a value for tangent?
Well, the a is still from the equation. Oh, you're talking about looking at a graph.
Yeah.
So let's just
do like number 7, I guess.
Yeah, you're talking about one of these guys. Yeah.
Did you just say that my question was bad?
So here's what I would say, Blake. So we have our midline, right? And you're given these other 2 points. That distance is going to be your absolute value of A.
Oh, okay. So then what's the importance of those points?
Either way, it's to figure the absolute value of A out. They're the key points that when you're graphing.
Okay.
Right, so you graph the 5 key points. 2 of them are asymptotes. One of them is the midline, and the other 2 are these points that are on the tail.
You use the asymptote to find the period.
And you use the asymptotes to find the period. Yep. So just the 5 key points that are basically labeled on there.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Tommy?
Can you find C for me, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
So this is the period, right?
Right.
For tangent, the period is pi times the absolute value C.
And the other one was 2 pi, right?
Right.
Okay.
So here C is just 1.
Okay.
Cool?
Yeah.
Okay. Blake, you happy?
I am happy.
Okay.
As happy as I can get.
Sure. Well, that's all we can shoot for, right? Is maximum level happiness.
I mean, I might not be happy.
Oh no.
Give me a sec. My bad.
Sure. You can be bad as you want to be. Feel like that was the name of somebody's biography.
Never mind. Sorry. I guess I had a question for something that isn't in existence.
Yeah, that's Dennis Rodman's biography. So, there you go. Or autobiography, I guess. I guess he allegedly wrote it. Probably ghostwritten. Paul. Yeah, what page are we looking at? Okay, page 6, letter B. So it says we have a minimum at -6, -12, and the second maximum after that at 24.8. So I'm just going to draw in a picture. So this is the midline or whatever. Actually, I'm just going to draw it as a solid line. It'll probably be easier. So I have some minimum, and it goes maximum, back down to a minimum, and back to the maximum, right? You happy with that? Okay. So I know the minimum or the midline is halfway in between these y coordinates, right? So that's like the median value, the number in the middle of them, which in the case of two numbers is just the average. So that's -2. You happy with that? Okay. The amplitude is just the distance from extrema back to midline. So in this case, it would be like going from 8 down to -2. How many units did we have to move? 10, right? You did 8 units down to 0 and then 2 more units down to get to -2. So that's my value for A. So far, so good. And I haven't really used any formulas or anything. I just kind of used a little bit of, some counting, right? Relied on my definitions for what these things mean and did some counting. Next thing I'm going to do is work on finding my C. To do that, I'm going to figure out how much I have here. So from here to here is 1 period. And then here to here is another half. So I have 1.5 periods is going to be the distance in the x's. So to go from -6 to +24 was how many units? 30. So I have 1.5 periods is 30 units. If I divide both sides by 1.5, I get that 1 period then has to be 20 units. And then I can solve for C by dividing both sides by 2 pi and choosing the positive result. So I can say that C is 10 over pi. Sydney? 30 divided by 1.5. I just did in my head. Like 30 divided by 2 is 15, right? So 30 divided by 1.5. Think about it this way. 30 divided by 15 is 2, right? So 30 divided by 1.5 is 20, right? I don't know, just mental math. You can use your calculator, that's fine too. Still got some more to do. Yeah, Luke? Sure. Okay, Paul, still doing all right? Okay, 3 things left to do. We need to pick whether we're going to do sine or cosine, figure out where the A should be positive or negative, and then find the value for H. Which one do we want to use here, sine or cosine? Good, cosine. Why? Because we have maxes and mins, right, in the problem? So the point from cosine that I'm going to pick is -1, 0, which is or 0, -1, sorry. Third try. 0, 1, which is a maximum. And then I'm going to pair that with any extreme point from my transformation. I have 2 to choose from. Does it matter which one I choose? No, they're both fine. Which one do you want to use, Paul? Okay. So 24, 8, which is the maximum. So we've chosen cosine. Because we're going max to max, what does that tell me about A? Very good, it's positive. If I had chosen the minimum, then A would have to be negative. And the H is what? 24. So if as long as that x-coordinate is 0, on the parent, the x-coordinate from the transform function is going to be my H. So that's enough to write this. Notice I'm writing pi over 10 because that coefficient is 1 over c. So I'm writing it the reciprocal. That's one possible answer. Are there more than that? Sure. How many do you have to give? One. Like,
Okay, so in a testing scenario, would you accept an answer like that, or would you want us to like put in that pilot?
it's fine either way. I'm not going to worry too much about it. You're welcome. Paul, you happy? Yeah, no problem. Who else has one they want to talk about? Happy to do more. Will? Bill? Billy? Sure. So the amplitude being 2 just tells me that the absolute value of A is 2. Since I know the period is 5 pi, I can use that to solve for C. So C has just got to be 5 over 2. Again, I'm going to choose the positive answer. Next thing I need is I'm going to choose whether I want to use sine or cosine. What should I choose in this case? Cosine, because I have a maximum. And the point that I'm going to use from cosine is 0, 1, which is a maximum. And it's got to pair up with the point 4 pi negative 2, which I'm also told is a maximum. So because we're going max to max, that tells me that A is positive. The H is 4 pi. But the K is not going to be quite as easy because notice that the y coordinate is not 0. So the K is not negative 2. We're going to have to kind of solve for K algebraically. So think back to when we graph these things, we do this transformation, right? So to get the y coordinate from for the transform function, we take A and we multiply that to the y coordinate from the parent function and then add K to it, right? So the y coordinate for my transform function is negative 2. My A is positive 2. The y for my parent function is 1. So that will allow me to solve for K. So 2 times 1 is 2, and I subtract it over. So K is negative 4. And that's all I need. Does that feel okay there, Billy? Cool. And again, this is the thing that in general I'm trying to avoid having to do. I'm going to choose to use sine or cosine respectively whenever possible to avoid having to do that. Not that it's that hard to do, but it's like if I don't have to, like why would I, if I can just make a decision to avoid having to do some work, like just make the smart decision, avoid having to do the work. But if you don't care, like I don't want to have to decide, like I'm just going to do that every time. Like that's okay, you can do that every time. It's not that big of a deal. And just FYI, for both of these types of problems, you know that you can check these on your calculator, right? The easiest way to check them on your calculator is just to take the x coordinate and plug it into your answer and make sure you're getting the corresponding y coordinate. In the case of a problem where you have 2 points, you should do that for both points. But if we're looking at letter B here, I'm going to make sure I'm in radian mode to do this. Need to be in radian mode. and do 10 times cosine pi divided by 10 times parenthesis -6 minus 24, close my parentheses, minus 2, and this should be giving me -12, which it did. I also need to check to make sure that if I plug 24 in, I still get the same result. So just take the same thing and edit it, and I did get the y coordinate, so I'm pretty confident that that one's correct. And we could do the same thing here. So 2 times cosine 2 divided by 5 times x minus 4 pi. Oops, not x. Cheapers, creepers, Kulik. 4 pi. And then minus 4 I had at the end, right? Yeah. And that should be giving me a -2, which it did. Does that make sense to kind of what I'm doing there with my checks? Now, it's not a 100% check, but, you know, like you could have goofed up something else still in here, but it's a pretty good check. Like, it'll catch like the common mistakes, like if you forget to make something negative when it needs to be, it'll catch that. Or if you screwed up the C value when you're finding your period, it'll catch that. You know, like, or if you pick the wrong H for the sine versus cosine, it'll catch that. So it'll catch most of the obvious things. Like, it's still possible you could have made some other bonehead mistake in here and have it check out, but it's pretty good at catching the normal, simple stuff. Does that make sense? That's a good one. You could use that if you're graphing too, to check your points, your transform points at the end. You can take your x's, plug it into the original function, make sure you're getting the correct y coordinate. So it can check or can catch a lot of the silly arithmetic mistakes you might make when you screwed up adding fractions, or you wrote down 1/c instead of c, or, you know, forgot the negative on your h or something. It'll, if you do those kind of mistakes, it'll catch those things too. So that's a good thing, right? In general, this is standard check your answer kind of stuff that we'd have done in Algebra 1, but, you know, remind you guys that we can still do that. It's sometimes easy to overlook. Billy!
Back over how you found the K.
Yeah, so the K is just halfway between your max or your minimum and your maximum. So I just found the median of -12 and 8. So the number in the middle of those on the number line. So the median is the same as taking the average. So I just did 8 plus -12 divided by 2. Now you can't do that here because you don't have 2 points, but, you know, the midline is just halfway in between the 2 points I was given, so I just kind of use the definition and like, okay, that's not so bad. If you drew a really accurate graph and put like tick marks on it, you could have counted, right? But I'm not about that life. But you could have. Sydney, of course. Anybody else? Happy to do more if you guys have more questions on stuff. These have been, I think, pretty productive questions, right? Okay. So next up,